Word on campus was that the golden boy of the pre-law program had a very strict moral code. Whenever a girl confessed her feelings and gave him a gift, he would reject her flat out. But to keep his conscience clear, he would always pay her back for whatever the gift cost. As a broke college student surviving on instant noodles, desperation bred a wicked idea in my head. Clutching a cheap, beaded bracelet I bought off a street vendor for $2, I blocked his path and put on my most soulful gaze. I have a massive crush on you. Do you want to go out with me? Oh, and I bought you this bracelet. The golden boy looked at me. No. How much was the bracelet? I'll transfer you the money.
Me?
$780.50. Golden boy. While I was staring miserably at the glaring deficit on my tuition bill, my roommate was hanging off her loft bed, eagerly spilling the latest campus gossip. Did you guys hear? Weston from the law school rejected another girl yesterday? Oh, I heard about that. She gave him an engraved fountain pen. He rejected her, pulled out his phone, and Venmo'd her $100 on the spot. He said he doesn't accept gifts, but he pays for what he's given. The guy has principles. I shot up from my mattress like a rocket. Wait, seriously? He reimburses the original price of the confession gifts? Yep, it's his golden rule. He doesn't take advantage of anyone. A rejection is a rejection. But he refuses to owe anyone a favor. I thought about the pathetic $27 sitting in my bank account. Then I glanced back at the 4-digit nightmare on my tuition portal. Poverty really does awaken the criminal mastermind in you. Brilliant, flawless scheme instantly formed in my brain. Over the next 2 days, I memorized Weston's class schedule and the routes he usually walked on campus. Then I stopped by a local flea market stall just off campus to pick out a bracelet. How much for this string of beads? 50. Are you out of your mind? I'll give you $2.
Deal.
Don't worry, sweetheart. The vendor grinned. This bracelet is blessed for romance. Whoever you give it to will definitely fall in love with you.
I didn't care about the romance.
I just needed it to bless my tuition fund. Everything was set. At 4:30 on a Wednesday afternoon, right outside the law building, I perfectly ambushed Weston just as he walked out of his seminar. He looked even better in person than he did in the rumors. Dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark slacks, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. Looked like he was walking around with his own personal spotlight. I swallowed hard, took a massive step forward, and planted myself right in his way. I shoved the bracelet toward him. Weston, I have a massive crush on you, do? You want to go out with me? This is a bracelet I bought just for you. Weston stopped in his tracks. He didn't even blink.
No.
My heart leaped into my throat. I was just waiting for those magic words. How much was the gift? I'll transfer you the money.
Bingo.
Without batting an eyelash, I recited the exact number I had calculated beforehand. $780.50. Weston stared at the flimsy string of beads that looked like it was going to snap if the wind blew too hard. A look of pure disbelief crossed his face. This thing is nearly $800. Maybe I'm just out of touch. But is this some new form of daylight robbery? My cheeks burned, but I bit the bullet and spouted absolute nonsense with a straight face. I took this bracelet to a spiritual guru to get it specially blessed.
He said,
our auras are perfectly aligned, and this will ward off toxic relationships for 3 years. You get what you pay for. A low chuckle escaped his lips. His eyes rippled with amusement, bright and clear like sunlight hitting the water. The corner of his mouth curved up. He was so ridiculously handsome that my conscience almost woke up and forced me to confess the scam. But my sheer poverty kept me completely blind to guilt. You're an interesting one. He tilted his chin. Show me your Venmo QR.
Code.
My eyes lit up. Like fireworks, I whipped out my phone, pulled up the code, and shoved the screen toward him. I moved so fast, terrified he might change his mind. A soft chime rang out from my phone. You have received $800. My internal organs practically threw a parade. You sent $20. Too much. I tried my best to keep my face neutral.
Keep the change.
I hate typing decimals. He shoved his hands into his pockets and walked past me. Without a second glance, I spun around and yelled at his retreating back, my voice dripping with the most genuine gratitude I had ever felt in my life. Thank you, boss. May you graduate with a 4.0. May you drown in scholarship offers. May all your toxic exes stay away. May you win every bet you ever make. His footsteps paused for a fraction of a second. He didn't turn around, just lazily raised a hand in acknowledgement. Enough. He left me with a view of a very cool, very generous back. I stood there clutching my phone, almost crying tears of joy, looking at my bank balance, which now perfectly covered my tuition. With a few bucks to spare, I let out a long, heavy sigh of relief. But that peace only lasted about 12 hours. A text from my mom completely shattered my reality. She transferred me 40 bucks attached with a message: "Be careful with your spending this month. Your sister needs a new laptop for school. So money is a bit tight." I stared at the $40 in total silence. Last month, she gave me $400. This month it was slashed to 10%. How was I supposed to survive a whole month on 40 bucks? The wicked idea started bubbling up again. I had already done it once. What was stopping me from doing it again? Dying of embarrassment was temporary. Dying of starvation was permanent. This time, I was going to be way more prepared. I stayed up for 3 hours, reading a thread called 10,000 Lines to Melt a Guy's Heart. I filled half a notebook with cheesy, romantic lines and memorized them until I could recite them backward. The next day after class, I clutched my textbook and sprinted toward the law building, terrified I'd miss him. But the second I actually saw him, my brain turned to absolute mush. I spotted him standing outside the building talking to his buddy. I quickly smoothed down my shirt, took a deep breath, and marched over. I shoved a cheap, goofy capybara plush keychain right into his face and opened my mouth. "Weston, you are the light of my bank account. Wait, no. You are the light of my life." The moment the words left my mouth, my entire body went rigid. It was over. I completely fumbled the script. The air went dead silent for 2 agonizing seconds. He raised an eyebrow, his eyes swimming with pure mockery. "The light of your bank account." My face burned hot enough to fry an egg. I scrambled to fix it, my words tumbling out in a panicked rush. No. I meant you more like a light illuminating my life. My life, not my bank account." The more I panicked, the worse it got. The romantic lines I had spent all night memorizing violently collided in my head. "My love for you is like a freight train completely off the rails. It's like the pizza at the dining hall. Cheap but full of substance." Wait, no. His friend totally lost it. He doubled over, clutching his stomach, laughing so hard he practically collapsed onto the pavement. "I'm dying, Weston. Where did you find this comedian?" Even Weston's lips twitched upward into a genuine smile. I wanted the concrete to open up and swallow me whole. I dropped my head, my voice shrinking down to a pathetic whisper. "Sorry, I just got a little nervous." This was humiliating. Weston tapped the capybara keychain I was still holding up in the air. "Did your spiritual guru bless this one too? How much?"
No.
"No, guru. This time it's just 150. He took the goofy little capybara from my hand, turning it over in his fingers. He glanced from the plushie to my face. "This little thing kind of looks like you." He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times. A second later, the beautiful notification chime rang out. $200. I looked up at him, my eyes wide and confused. The extra, he raised an eyebrow, a teasing glint in his dark eyes. "Is the admission fee for that comedy routine?" I clutched my phone, staring at the fresh $200 in my account. Suddenly, the humiliation completely evaporated. If embarrassing myself paid this well, I would happily do it every day of the week. His friend threw an arm around Weston's shoulder and grinned at me. "Hey, freshman, we've got a basketball game tomorrow at 3. Make sure you come cheer for our boy. Don't forget to bring him some water." I gave an awkward laugh, but after his friend practically demanded I show up, I finally nodded. The next day, I arrived at the campus basketball courts right on time. It was packed. I had to stand all the way in the back, clutching a bottle of ice-cold sports drink, feeling a weird knot of anxiety in my stomach. The second Weston stepped onto the court, the screaming from the bleachers almost blew the roof off. He was wearing a royal blue and white jersey. His dark hair was slightly damp, sweeping just above his brow bone. During warm UPS, his shirt lifted just enough to expose a sliver of a lean, heavily muscled waist. I couldn't look away. I literally counted 8 distinct ABS. I silently concluded that looking at him was basically a meal in itself. The whistle blew when Weston was focused. He was ridiculously attractive. His movements were fluid and lethal, dribbling, crossing over, jumping, shooting. He sank 3-pointers effortlessly, one after another. Every time the ball swished through the net, the crowd absolutely lost their minds. The energy was contagious. Before I knew it, I was screaming his name with the rest of them. This guy was literally paying for my survival. He was my greatest benefactor. By the end of the first half, I was shouting with so much passion that my throat felt like sandpaper. The halftime buzzer echoed through the gym. I clutched the icy bottle to my chest and carefully squeezed my way through the packed crowd toward the benches, terrified the drink would get warm before I could hand it to him. Just as I broke through to the front row, a heavy hand clamped down on my arm. It was a guy in a stained muscle shirt. He looked like absolute trash. His eyes slowly dragged up and down my body. A greasy, uncomfortable smirk plastered on his face. Well, pushing your way to the front, sweetie. You here throwing yourself at Weston, too. I frowned, trying to yank my arm back, but his grip was like a vice. Let go of me. Don't be in such a rush. Two of his equally gross friends stepped up, boxing me in from both sides. Stop dreaming, little girl. Western standards are sky high. He's not gonna look twice at a thing like you. Why don't you hang out with our boy, Trent, instead? He knows how to treat a girl right. The buddies snickered. And looks so soft. Trent sneered, his hand reaching out toward my face. I wonder if the rest of you is just as. He never finished that sentence. A long, heavily veined arm shot out from my blind spot. A large hand clamped down over Trent's wrist, violently twisting it backward. A sickening pop sounded, followed by a blood-curdling scream. Trent was yanked halfway around by sheer brutal force. Before he could even regain his balance, a heavy sneaker slammed into the back of his knee, forcing him to instantly drop to the floor in agony. The entire section of the bleachers went dead silent. I looked up and crashed straight into a pair of icy, lethal eyes, Weston. He had just stepped off the court. He hadn't even grabbed a towel yet. Sweat trailed down his sharp jawline, and the muscles in his forearms were tight and completely flushed with adrenaline. What did you just say? Repeat it. His voice was like shattered glass. A raw, terrifying violence burned in his eyes, making him look like a completely different person from the aloof golden boy I knew. All the color drained from Trent's face. Weston, hey, man, I was just joking. Watch your fucking mouth. Weston released his wrist and gave him a casual shove. Trent collapsed onto his backside, scrambling away like a rat. Weston shifted his gaze to the two friends, whose faces were now sickly pale. His tone was as casual as discussing the weather. If I ever see any of you near her again, a kicked knee will be the least of your problems. Apologize to her. Trent clenched his jaw, staying silent. Weston took a slow half-step forward. I'm sorry, Trent screamed, his voice completely cracking in terror.
I'm sorry.
I was being a piece of shit. It'll never happen again. The two buddies tripped over their words trying to apologize, looking more pathetic by the second.
Get lost.
The guys nodded frantically, hauled Trent to his feet, and shoved their way blindly through the crowd to escape. Weston didn't even watch them leave. He slowly turned his head and looked down at me. The terrifying, murderous look in his eyes faded, replaced by something dark and unreadable. Are you okay? I stood completely frozen, my fingers gripping the plastic bottle so hard it crinkled. I still hadn't fully processed the chaos. Weston reached over, grabbed a clean towel from the bench and slowly wiped down his fingers, acting as if he had just touched something deeply contaminated. Why are you just standing there? Give me the water. Snapped out of it, hurriedly handing him the bottle. Thank you for helping me. It's still ice cold. Drink it slowly, so you don't hurt your throat. He paused right as he unscrewed the cap. He lowered his eyes to look at me, a lazy, amused smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth. You're surprisingly attentive. I didn't think anything of it. I just nodded sincerely. Of course I am. You're literally funding my college degree. You are. My God. I watched his profile as he tilted his head back to drink, his Adam's apple bobbing sharply with every swallow. My ears suddenly felt uncomfortably hot. I quickly snapped my gaze to the floor. Weston let out a soft laugh, pulled his phone from his gym bag, and tapped the screen. The beautiful angelic notification sound chimed from my pocket. You have received $300. My eyes went wide. I stared at him in shock.
Why?
Why did you send me money? The water was a gift. It was free. He leaned down. He got so close that there was barely an inch of space between our faces. He leaned down. He got so close that there was barely an inch of space between our faces. The heat radiating off his skin was downright criminal, carrying a scent of sandalwood, sweat, and something distinctly expensive. His dark eyes locked onto mine, tracking the rapid, frantic flutter of my pulse right in the crook of my neck. Consider it a hazard pay bonus, he whispered, his deep voice vibrating right against my ear. And an advance. Because if you're going to show up to my games, scream until you lose your voice and get accosted by local wildlife, I prefer. My cheerleader's well compensated. Cheerleader? My brain short-circuited. My tongue felt like it was glued to the roof of my mouth. Before I could process the absurdity or the sheer electric charge of his words, He casually straightened back up, slapped the cap back onto the water bottle, and took a deep, elegant gulp. He offered me a lazy, lopsided smile, slung his gym bag over one broad shoulder, and turned toward the locker rooms without another word. I stood rooted to the spot, holding my phone with trembling hands. Another $300. Combined with the $800 from the bracelet and the $200 from the capybara plushie, I had earned a grand total of $1,300 off the law school's golden boy in under 48 hours. I was officially a professional extortionist with a 0% interest loan and a crushing, deeply inconvenient romantic crisis. You look like a dog that just successfully stole a steak off the dinner table and is now waiting for the rolled-up newspaper to hit its head, my roommate, Chloe, observed the next morning. She was hanging upside down from her loft bed, a slice of cold buttered toast hovering precariously above her nose. "I am not a dog," I muttered, staring at my bank account app. The numbers looked glowing, pristine, and entirely unearned. I am an independent contractor, providing emotional labor and security services. Right, Chloe drawled, flipping herself right side up. Which is why campus. Reddit is currently exploding with thread after thread about how Weston Vance, the untamable, cold-blooded legal prodigy, brutally broke a frat guy's wrist at the gym yesterday for disrespecting his girl. I choked on my cheap instant coffee. His what? You heard me, she smirked, sliding down the wooden ladder like a hyperactive squirrel. The whole campus thinks you two are secretly dating. Or at least, that you're the only person who's managed to crack his icy exterior.
Word is he
Took your dumb little capybara keychain and clipped it onto his $400 leather briefcase. My heart did a terrifying, acrobatic flip inside my chest. He attached the $2 flea market plushie to his designer briefcase? He's just sticking to his golden rule, I insisted weakly, clutching my coffee mug like a lifeline. He doesn't owe anyone favors. He pays for what he gets. Sweetheart, people don't snap bones over a bottle of sports drink, Chloe said, patting my cheek with patronizing affection. You've stumbled into a dangerous
game.
And, honestly, if he finds out you're running a confession racket on him, he won't just reject you.
He's pre-law.
He'll draft the lawsuit himself. Her words hung in the air like a cold shower. She was right. Weston wasn't just some rich, gullible jock. He was a ruthless academic shark who spent his weekends analyzing contract law and torts. If he realized that my spiritual guru was a toothless guy named Sal who sold bootleg watches off a folding table, he'd turn my life into a living legal hell. I swore to myself right then and there, no more scams. I am done. I'm clean. I survived off my tuition surplus and my leftover $80 for the next 2 weeks.
I
Ate plain bagels, avoided the law building like the plague, and ducked into shrubbery whenever I saw someone wearing a crisp white dress shirt and dark
slacks.
Then winter hit. And with winter came my university's mandatory lab fee for organic chemistry, an unexpected textbook charge, and a frantic call from my sister saying her dorm heater broke and she needed a cheap space heater. Total cost, $450. My bank account, $12.14. I stood in my room, staring at the ceiling, feeling the familiar, insidious whisper of poverty crawling back up my spine. Desperation didn't just breed criminal masterminds. It cultivated absolute, shameless lunatics. Just one last time, I whispered to the empty room. One final heist. Then I go. Straight. Finding something to sell him was trickier this time. It couldn't be jewelry. He'd suspect the aura bullshit. It couldn't be a plushie. It had to be something so hopelessly personal, so undeniably dramatic, that he couldn't possibly assign it a reasonable market value. I spent 40 minutes digging through my closet until I found it, an old, dusty, slightly battered acoustic guitar I had bought at a yard sale 3 years ago for $15. 2 of the strings were broken and the wood was scratched, but it had character. I spent the evening scribbling a horrific, incredibly sappy song on a piece of lined notebook paper. The next afternoon, the weather was brutally cold. Snow was lightly dusting the red brick pathways of the quad. I caught Weston leaving the law library alone, wearing a tailored charcoal overcoat that made him look like he belonged on the cover of a luxury magazine. He had his hands shoved in his pockets, his breath pluming in the frigid air. My legs trembled, but I gritted my teeth and dragged the heavy guitar case into the center of the walkway, stepping right into his path. Weston, I called out. He stopped dead in his tracks. When his dark eyes landed on me, a subtle, unmistakable change washed over his face. The cold, distant posture melted away, replaced by an expression of deep, simmering intrigue. Well, well, he murmured, taking a few deliberate steps toward me. The financial strategist returns. I was beginning to think you'd abandoned your investment. I haven't, I squeaked, blowing on my freezing fingers. I was just working on your gift. He halted a foot away from me, his towering frame completely blocking the icy wind. He looked down at the battered black guitar case sitting in the snow. Between us. A guitar? He raised an eyebrow. Are you planning to serenade me in sub-zero weather? I wrote you a song. I lied smoothly, assuming my best tragic, longing posture. It took me weeks. It's called the interest rate of my unrequited soul. But my voice is too damaged from screaming at your basketball game to sing it today. Weston bit the inside of his cheek, but the twitch at the corner of his mouth gave him away. A song, written specifically for me. How much did this masterpiece cost you to produce? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the biggest markup of my career. $500, I blurted out. The guitar belonged to my late grandfather, but the emotional distress of writing the lyrics brought the appraisal value up to $500. Silence fell over the quad. A lone snowflake landed gently on Weston's long, dark eyelashes. He didn't blink. He just stared at me, his gaze so sharp and penetrating that I felt like I was being dissected under a microscope. 500, he repeated softly. 500, I affirmed, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Slowly, Weston pulled his hands from his overcoat pockets. He didn't reach for
His phone.
Instead, he stepped right over the guitar case, closing the distance between us until he was standing absurdly close. He reached out his gloved fingers, gently catching a stray lock of hair that had whipped across my face, tucking it behind my burning ear. His touch was terrifyingly warm. You know, Weston said softly, his voice a low, smooth purr that sent a shiver straight down my spine. I've been reading up on contract law regarding the evaluation of personal services. Have you? I have, he whispered, leaning down until his lips were hovering just above.
Meanings.
And I've come to a conclusion. I'm being severely overcharged. My breath hitched.
What?
Overcharged, he repeated, his eyes dark and gleaming with a dangerous light. $800 for a $2 string of plastic.
$200 for a cheap
plushie. $300 for a sports drink. And now $500 for a song you haven't even sung to me. The blood drained completely from my face. My knees went entirely weak. He knows. Oh God, he knows. I don't know what you're talking about. I gasped, taking a frantic step back, but my heel caught on the edge of the guitar case. I wobbled, flailing my arms wildly, expecting to crash headfirst into the snow.
Bank.
But Weston's arms shot out with blinding speed, wrapping firmly around my waist and pulling me flush against his hard chest. The impact knocked the air right out of my lungs. Easy, he murmured, his grip around my waist ironclad. He didn't let go.
He
Looked down at me, an impossibly handsome, wicked smile spreading across his
face.
Did you really think I didn't know what a cheap flea market bead felt like, sweetheart? My mother serves on the board of 3 modern art museums.
I
Know the difference between blessed crystal and painted acrylic. I was hyperventilating. You knew? From the very first second, he admitted freely, his thumb casually resting on the small of my back. You stood there with a straight face and told me a string of sweatshop beads was worth $800. It was the most blatant, audacious scam I've ever seen on this campus. Then why? I practically wailed, clutching his dark lapels just to stay upright. Why did you transfer the money? Why didn't you call the police?
Why?
Did you pay me? Weston leaned down, his forehead lightly resting against mine, his warm breath fanning across my skin. Because, he whispered, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my world spin. You were starving, and watching you try to play a criminal mastermind was the most entertaining thing that's happened to me since I got into law school. I stood frozen in the snow, completely caught in his grasp, my mind spinning into a vortex of utter humiliation and profound confusion. You knew I was broke. I squeaked out. Your shoes have a hole in the left sole, he said simply, his gaze dropping briefly to my beat-up sneakers. You were living on instant ramen. I saw you buying 3 dozen packs at the convenience store at 2 a.m. last month.
And
Your tuition portal background was open on your laptop when you were studying at the library 3 weeks ago. I have very good eyesight. You stalked my tuition portal. I observed my surroundings, he corrected smoothly, his voice laced with shameless amusement. So, when a terrified, starving girl marched up to me with a $2 bracelet and demanded $800 with a completely straight face, I figured I'd see how far she'd go. I pushed against his chest, my face burning with a heat that could have melted the glaciers. Let me go. Oh my God, I'm going to transfer it all back.
I'll.
Take out a loan, I'll sell a kidney, No. Weston cut me off, his grip on my waist tightening just enough to stop my squirming. You won't. Why not? Because you owe me, he said softly, a dark, dangerous glint flashing in his
Eyes.
Under the principles of unjust enrichment and promissory estoppel, you've taken $1,800 of my money under false pretenses. That's a felony, sweetheart. My jaw dropped. You said you weren't calling the cops. I'm not, he smiled, and it was the most beautiful, terrifying smile I had ever seen. I'm offering you a settlement out of court. What? What kind of settlement? I asked suspiciously, suddenly very aware of how warm his hands were, how broad his chest felt under my palms, and how dangerously close our lips were. Weston tilted his head, his dark hair catching the winter light. I have a mandatory law alumni gala next Friday. My parents will be there. 3 senior partners from top-tier firms in New York will be there. And most importantly, my mother has invited the daughter of a family friend who has been relentlessly pursuing me for 6 months. I blinked. Okay? I need a date, Weston said clearly. A convincing, devoted, completely enamored date who can act like she's head over heels in love with me, keep the heiress off my back, and survive an evening of high society legal sharks. You want me to be your fake girlfriend? I gasped. Not fake, Weston corrected softly, his eyes dropping to my mouth before rising back to meet my gaze. A temporary independent contractor. You've already proven you're a brilliant actress. You stood in front of me and swore a capybara plushie had emotional substance. Acting like you're madly in love with me should be an easy payday. And if I do it? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. The debt is cleared. The $1,800 is wiped clean, Weston declared. Plus, I'll buy you a proper winter coat and feed you real food. No more instant noodles. I stared at him, weighing my options. On one hand, I was agreeing to go to a high society event with a man who knew all my dirty secrets, who was absurdly wealthy, dangerously smart, and ridiculously attractive. On the other hand, free food, no debt, and a real winter coat. Poverty had already ruined my moral compass. There was no point in pretending I had any pride left. Fine, I grumbled, crossing my arms over my chest. I'll be your fake girlfriend for the night, but you pay for the dress. Weston chuckled, a deep, rich sound that seemed to vibrate straight through the cold air. He finally released my waist, though he didn't move far. He reached down, effortlessly picked up my battered guitar case with one hand, and offered me his other gloved hand. Deal, he said softly. Come on, strategist. Let's go get you some dinner. You look like you're about to faint. The week leading up to the gala was an absolute blur of absurdity. Weston, true to his word, took his role as my client with agonizing seriousness. On Tuesday, he dragged me to a high-end boutique off-campus. I tried to look at the price tags, but every time I did, Weston would calmly take the tag out of my hand, flip it over so I couldn't see it, and hand another dress to the salesperson. Try this one, he instructed, leaning back in a plush velvet armchair while sipping espresso. I came out of the fitting room, wearing an emerald green silk gown. It fit like a second skin, draped elegantly over my shoulders, and pooled around my feet like liquid jewel. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the girl staring back. Gone was the broke, frantic student clutching a $2 bracelet. In her place was someone who looked radiant. I stepped out of the fitting room, suddenly feeling deeply self-conscious. It's a bit much, isn't it? Weston paused, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. His dark eyes swept over me, slowly, taking in every inch of the dress, every line, every bare stretch of my shoulders. The air in the boutique suddenly felt thick, heavy, and charged. It's perfect, he said softly, his voice dropping an octave. He stood up, walked over to the manager, pulled out a black card, and handed it over without looking at the bill. We'll take it. And matching shoes. Weston, this must cost. I don't care what it costs, he interrupted smoothly, standing right behind me. In front of the three-way mirror. He placed his hands lightly on my bare shoulders, his touch sending a jolt of electricity straight down my spine.
His
reflection looked down at mine. You're with me. You don't look at price tags. When you're with me. My breath hitched. My heart was doing frantic gymnastics. I was supposed to be performing a service to clear a scam debt, but every time he looked at me like that, the line between fake and real blurred into complete dust. By Friday night, I was a nervous wreck. Weston picked me up at my dorm in a sleek black town car. When I stepped out into the lobby, Chloe nearly fell off the couch and 3 girls from my floor dropped their laundry baskets. Weston was wearing a custom black tuxedo, his dark hair styled back, looking so absurdly, unfairly handsome that my brain completely wiped itself clean of all functional English. He held the door open for me, his eyes dark and burning as he looked at me in the emerald dress. Ready to earn your settlement, strategist? He murmured as I slid into the leather back seat. If I throw up on your expensive tuxedo, does that count as a breach of contract? I whispered back frantically. Weston let out a soft laugh, sitting down beside me. His shoulder brushed against mine, sending a wave of warmth through the cold evening. He reached over, taking my freezing, trembling hand in his large, warm one, lacing our fingers together. You won't throw up, he said gently, squeezing my hand. Just stay close to me. Smile. Look at me like I'm the only person in the room, and let me handle the rest. Looking at you like you're the only person in the room isn't the hard part. I muttered under my breath before I could stop myself. Weston froze. He turned his head sharply to look at me, his dark eyes wide with a sudden, intense hunger. What did you say? Nothing, I squeaked, my face bursting into flames. I said, the catering better be good. A slow, devastating smirk spread across his lips. He didn't let go of my hand. He held it all the way to the grand ballroom of the city's finest hotel. The gala was an intimidating sea of chandeliers, crystal champagne flutes, tailored suits, and diamonds. The air smelled of expensive perfume and corporate ambition. The second Weston entered the room with me on his arm, conversation stuttered. Eyes turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd of elite lawyers, judges, and high society families. Weston Vance, the famously untouchable, icy legal prodigy, who had rejected every socialite on the East Coast, had walked in holding hands with an unknown girl in an emerald gown. Keep your chin up, Weston whispered into my ear, his lips brushing the shell of my ear so closely it sent shivers straight down my legs. You look like royalty. Act like it. I leaned into his side, wrapping my arm around his firm biceps. I'm currently pretending everyone in this room owes me tuition money.
It helps with the
confidence. A sharp chuckle escaped him. Brilliant. Within 10 minutes, we were approached by his parents. His father was a prominent corporate defense attorney with silver hair and a stern, evaluating
gaze.
His mother was an impeccably dressed woman with sharp eyes that scanned me from head to toe in a fraction of a second. Weston, his father greeted, nodding curtly. And you must be. This is Maya, Weston introduced smoothly, his hand resting possessively on the small of my waist, pulling me firmly against his side. She's an undergraduate, majoring in biochemistry, and she's the most brilliant person I've met on campus. Biochemistry? Brilliant? I felt my cheeks warm, but I smiled gracefully, extending my hand. It's an honor to meet you both. His mother's eyes softened just a fraction as she shook my hand. Biochemistry? That's quite a rigorous path. How on earth did you manage to drag my son away from his mock trial briefs? Oh, it wasn't hard, I said, putting on my best adoring smile and looking up at Weston. He just needed a little financial persuasion. Weston coughed sharply, coughing into his hand, while his father let out a rare, booming laugh. Financial persuasion. I like her, Weston. She speaks your language. For the next hour, everything went miraculously well. Weston never left my side. He fetched me champagne, guided me through crowds with his hand firmly anchored to my waist, and listened to me talk about my classes with a quiet, rapt attention that made my heart ache with genuine feeling. He wasn't playing a role anymore, or if he was the greatest actor on earth. Then, the storm arrived. Weston. Oh, I was wondering when you'd finally arrive. A stunning woman in a sapphire blue gown glided over, her hair styled in effortless waves, diamonds glittering at her throat. This was clearly Victoria, the heiress Weston had warned me about. Her sharp gaze landed on me, scanning my dress, my shoes, and finally resting on Weston's hand, which was firmly planted on my hip. Her eyes narrowed into lethal slits. "And who is this?" Victoria asked, her tone dripping with subtle condescension. I didn't know the law department allowed undergrads at the alumni banquet. Before I could answer, Weston's grip on my waist tightened subtly. "Maya is here. With me, Victoria. As my date." "Your date?" Victoria laughed airily, pulling out her phone. "That's funny, Weston, because I was just talking to some students from the campus Greek council, and a very interesting rumor came up." My stomach instantly plunged into a pit of Arctic ice. Victoria smiled, a cruel, triumphant smirk. "They said there's a girl on campus who runs a ridiculous scam on wealthy guys. She buys $2 trinkets off street vendors, confesses fake feelings, and tricks desperate men into paying her hundreds of dollars under the guise of reimbursement." They even had a picture of the girl buying a plastic bead bracelet at the flea market 2 weeks ago. She turned her phone around, displaying a high-definition photo on the screen. It was me, standing at Sal's flea market stall, holding up the yellow string of
Beads.
The grand ballroom suddenly felt suffocatingly quiet. My heart stopped beating. The blood roared in my ears. The shame, sudden and overwhelming, slammed into my chest like a physical blow. It was over. The lie was exposed in front of his parents, the elite partners, the entire ballroom. I was a fraud, a pathetic, broke girl who scammed rich boys for tuition money. My voice was a tiny, broken whisper. Tears pricked at the corners of my
Eyes.
I pulled away from Weston's arm, my hand trembling violently. "I'm sorry. I should go." I turned to run toward the exit, my vision blurring with hot, humiliating tears. "Maya, stop." Weston's voice rang out across the quieted circle, not panicked, not angry, but loud, commanding, and absolute. Before I could reach the glass doors, he caught my hand. He pulled me back, refusing to let me hide, refusing to let me run. I kept my head down, biting my lip, terrified of the look of disgust I was sure would be on his face. Instead, Weston gently took my chin between his fingers, forcing me to look up at him. His dark eyes weren't filled with anger. They were burning with an intense, fierce fury, directed entirely at Victoria. Weston turned back toward Victoria, stepping in front of me like a solid, impenetrable shield. His stature was commanding, his expression turned to pure, icy steel. The pre-law student was gone. In his place stood a formidable, terrifying legal force. "Victoria," Weston said, his voice deadly quiet, echoing clearly across the surrounding crowd. "Are you currently accusing my partner of fraud in a room full of senior trial attorneys and federal judges?" Victoria blinked, her smug expression faltering slightly under the terrifying weight of his gaze. I'm just showing you the truth. She scammed you, Weston. She took $800 from you for a piece of junk." "She didn't scam me," Weston declared, his tone cold, precise, and completely unwavering. "Every single transaction between Maya and myself was a legally binding, mutually agreed upon oral contract under Section 71 of the Restatement. Second of contracts." The entire crowd of elite lawyers went completely dead silent. A few older partners at the back actually raised their champagne glasses in sudden interest. "What?" Victoria gasped. "The item transferred was an irrevocable gift accompanied by a voluntary liquidated damages reimbursement," Weston recited, his voice smooth as silk and twice as sharp. "I was fully aware of the material condition of the item prior to the transfer of funds. Furthermore, the consideration provided by Maya included emotional value, humor, and a temporary relief from the exhausting, opportunistic advances of people who think money buys access to my personal
Life.
A quiet gasp rippled through the onlookers. Victoria's face turned bright red. In short, Weston stepped forward, taking my hand and lacing his fingers tightly with mine, holding our joined hands up for the entire room to see. "I didn't get scammed. I made an investment. And it was the single best financial decision I've ever made in my life." His mother gasped softly, a slow, delighted smile spreading across her face. His father let out another booming laugh, clapping his hands together. Victoria stood frozen, humiliated, her phone shaking in her hand, before turning on her heel and practically sprinting out of the ballroom. I stared up at Weston, completely breathless, my heart pounding so hard I felt it in my teeth. Weston, you just used contract law to defend my scam? Weston looked down at me, his icy glare completely vanishing, replaced by that soft, dangerously intoxicating gaze reserved only for me. It wasn't a scam, Maya, he whispered, leaning down so only I could hear.
It
Was an acquisition. An hour later, the gala was wrapping up. Weston had spent the rest of the night parading me around the room like I was a national treasure, introducing me to federal judges and managing partners who all seemed thoroughly charmed by my presence and deeply amused by Weston's fierce protectiveness. By midnight, we were sitting in the back seat of the dark town car, heading back toward campus. The city lights flickered across the windows, casting soft shadows across the leather interior. I leaned my head back against the seat, completely exhausted, but my mind was racing. Weston, I asked softly into the quiet car. He turned to look at me, his bow tie untied, hanging loosely around his open collar, making him look breathtakingly relaxed. You defended me back there, I said, looking down at my hands. You wiped away the debt. You bought me this dress, you fed me, you protected me from Trent, and you humiliated Victoria. Why? I thought I made that clear, he murmured, sliding closer across the leather seat until there was no distance left between us. It was an investment. Stop talking like a lawyer, I whispered, looking up into his dark, intense
eyes.
Why did you really do it? Weston stared at me for a long, quiet moment. He reached out his hand gently, cupping the back of my neck, his thumb caressing my jawline. The touch was so tender, so genuine, that it stripped away all my defenses. Because, Weston said, his voice dropping to a low, raw whisper that made my soul tremble, the very first day you stood in front of me with that ridiculous, fragile string of yellow beads, you looked me right in the eye, shivering, broke and terrified, but you had more nerve and fire than anyone I'd ever met. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't pay you $800 for a bracelet, Maya, he continued, his eyes locked onto mine with undeniable truth. I paid $800 to make sure you'd come back. And when you came back with that stupid capybara plushie, I knew I was completely finished. Weston, I have a very strict moral code, he murmured, his face inching closer, his warm breath mingling with mine. I reject every girl who gives me a gift because I don't want to owe anyone anything. But with you, I want to owe you everything. I want every cheap keychain, every terrible written song, every single fake confession you have. Tears pricked my eyes again, not from shame this time, but from an overwhelming, terrifying rush of pure joy. I don't have any more fake confessions, I whispered, wrapping my arms around his neck, sinking into his warmth. I'm completely out of inventory. Good, Weston whispered against my lips, a devastatingly handsome smile breaking across his face. Then let's start making real ones. He closed the final inch between us. The kiss was slow, deep, and intoxicating, a perfect blend of victory, warmth, and a promise that shattered every scam, every debt, and every defense I had ever built. It wasn't a business transaction. It was an absolute surrender. When he finally pulled back, resting his forehead against mine, we were both breathless. So, I murmured, my voice trembling with a giddy laugh as I looked into his dark, shining eyes. Does this mean I'm officially your girlfriend? Weston chuckled, resting his large hands securely on my waist. Under the terms of our new verbal agreement, yes. Effective immediately. Lifetime tenure. And what's my compensation package? I teased softly. Weston smirked, pulling me closer into his lap, his lips lightly brushing against my neck, sending a shiver of delight straight down my spine. Unlimited access to my bank account, he whispered into my skin. Guaranteed 4.0 tutor for life. Free sports drinks, and a boyfriend who will break the wrists of anyone who ever dares to make you feel small again. I let out a soft laugh, closing my eyes and burying my face into the crook of his neck, inhaling the wonderful scent of sandalwood and victory. Deal, golden boy, I whispered. No refunds.